Welcome to Activations with JJ Ascension Message. In this episode, I will be discussing some of the things that I learned while doing one-on-one Atlantean Past-Life Regressions, as well as my recent Atlantean Group Past-Life Regression, which took place on December 17th. Welcome, my friends. Thank you so much for co-creating with me today for this episode. If you jumped in to find out what this is all about, some of you may be new, some of you may not be, but what came up for us during December was a very fascinating thing that started on the 1212 portal. And what it was my spirit guides came through and said, 1212 marks the opening of the Atlantean 5D portal. And what we are doing is we are giving you an increased amount of access to the 5D energies of Atlantis, a timeline which still exists. As you know, there was a timeline of Atlantis which ended in destruction. And many people have many theories about that. People have channeled information about that. I talk a little bit more about those occurrences in the last 2 podcast episodes I had. So you can find out more about those. If you look at the description, I'll have links. But we are going to focus today on what came through during the sessions where I connected people with their 5D Atlantean selves, technically parallel lives, which are still living out in that timeline, their existence. And some really incredible things came through. There was a big variety of information that came through. And I, of course, have asked their permission to share this information. I do not normally share what happens in one-on-one sessions with anybody else. But I felt that it was so important for the collective to hear these stories in order to awaken their own memories of parallel lives in Atlantis. Because essentially what's happening right now is as we connect with 5D Atlantean energy, as well as 5D Lemurian energy, we are getting closer and closer to the merging of those timelines with our own that will assist Gaia in the completion of this 5D ascension process. So I think it's really, really, again, very vital that we understand, awaken, remove the veil to these various lives, to what the world looked like or looks like in 5D Atlantis. Again, I'm going to be sharing little snippets of information from those sessions, as well as some information about our Atlantean Group Past-Life Regression. So many incredible, incredible things came through. Cannot wait to share them with you. In the very first session I did, we started off by going through the 5D Atlantean portal, and I started beginning to see different guides come through. I saw a guide that looked like an Asian gentleman. I felt like he was Lao Tzu. I also felt like the presence of Lord Maitreya was there, and some other ascended masters. It was very fascinating. They were all following this person and her higher self, who was carrying a green crystal, and it felt like they were all taking the crystal somewhere. The building that they entered had a spiral labyrinth, and they were walking in a circle around the edges until they got the center of the space. And the center of the space was like a big, big open room, and it was kind of like a temple. I couldn't really tell if it was a temple or just some kind of building. And there was a lot of technology. It felt very technical, but very futuristic. It felt like there were computer screens, but they were those transparent kind of computer screens, like when you watch movies about the future and it's not like solid, you can see through it. And all of those screens felt like they were a hologram, and they were everywhere. And this alternate version of her, this 5D Atlantean version of her, felt like she was a scientist or a researcher in a laboratory, but it felt like there were more researching like technology than biology, right? And there was a tablet, like a little iPad type tablet, and she was taking notes on it and measuring things. It felt like they were showing her different symbols and different codes. After that, they guided her into a different room where there was a large crystal hanging from the ceiling. In that place, there was a lot of white light. I couldn't really even tell what color the crystal was. It felt like a blue-green with a little bit of yellow in it. And it felt like a power source, which is very common when I do past life regressions into Atlantis. I feel like I've seen lots of crystal power sources, very, very common for these types of sessions. But I feel like there was definitely some energy being exchanged at that moment, and that her parallel self was helping her in today's world, in her body, to download new codes. They looked like those little discs you put in a camera, like those little memory discs that you put in a camera. That's exactly what they felt like. It felt like she was having them being replaced. And so what was going to happen was they were putting all these little memory discs in her, and they weren't going to be activated all at one time because there was so much to come through that it would be too overwhelming for her body to receive it all at one time. So her parallel self was making sure that it was done slowly. And then we were taken to another life. This happened quite a few times. I do believe that many of us experienced more than one life in 5D Atlantis. And so again, in these one-on-one sessions, more than one life came through. We went from scene to scene to scene. In the next scene for this person, it felt like we were in an indoor garden, like with plants, and the word greenhouse came through, the word biosphere came through. It felt like she was just there for recreation. She was sitting down, reading a book, and it felt like it was very humid in there, just, again, very relaxing. There's another person there, and it felt like her partner. And they took her hand, and it was like they came to get her, just to pick her up or something, just something very common like that. They walked together, they were talking, and that's how that scene ended. Just a regular life, just to show them that it was peaceful and calm. And then there was one final scene. It was really fascinating because they did not want to take her completely there. They just wanted to imagine herself watching it on a TV screen, so then her energy wouldn't need to be calibrated to get to where we were going, to what we were seeing. And so she was shown that she was on a ship, and there was like a control panel, and she was maneuvering levers and dials and buttons, and it felt like it was really smooth. Like the control panel was totally smooth. There were buttons on there, but you couldn't like see them. You could just feel them energetically. And the most interesting part about this session is her guide said, imagine you have that control panel in front of you, that's smooth, and just start playing with the buttons and the levers and all of the things with your hands as if you're really doing it. And in the end, I felt very strongly like she was playing kind of music. It felt like vibrations were coming from it. Like it was like a synthesizer. I could actually hear the sounds coming from that. And that was the end of that particular scene of an Atlantean past life. After that, we really focused on the shape of a triangle, and I felt drawn to have her draw a triangle in the air with her finger to get her back into her body. So that was the end of that session. I'm going to shift into another one now. This next one started off as we entered the 5D Atlantean portal and landed in this really fantastical world outside in nature, but it did not look like our Earth today. There's a new movie out by Disney. I think it's called Strange World. It looked like that. It looked like these really different kinds of brightly colored plants. And there were these butterflies and all kinds of flora and fauna that were more jewel tones, colors we don't have in our Earth today. And so her guides were inviting her to connect with the elemental energies of 5D Atlantis. So in the previous one, we were having her connect with like technology, although she did spend time in that biosphere. And although a lot of people think Atlantis was pure technology, all kinds of advanced technology, you will notice as I share these stories with you, there's a lot of nature in here. I think that's why this Atlantis version timeline kept going, because it did not get too imbalanced with nature. So as she was walking through this vision, she was connecting with the plants, the insects, and she felt like there was a point where she was kind of done with that. And we went to the next phase. There was this doorway, and it felt like a doorway in the middle of the woods. And in the end, I honestly felt like it was architecture built into nature, kind of like Hobbiton, like in The Hobbit, in The Lord of the Rings, where you see the house they lived in. It kind of looks like it's in the side of the hill. And I realized this was her home in this past parallel life. It was a place that she lived, and she was going there first person. And it felt very masculine. The being that she was a very masculine energy coming through. And as we moved forward in the session, it became very clear that this person, this being, was existing in this Atlantean timeline in order to balance out some of the more cerebral, scientific, technological things that were going on with the collective and ground the entire group. Their energy was very grounding. They were always connected to nature. They actually had a pet dragon, like a pet dragon they would exchange different things with. It was like the dragon would bring them a gift and then they would give the dragon something back. In this past life regression, I literally fast forwarded to a time when the dragon died, and I could feel like this being was grieving. This like hobbit, I guess you could say, was grieving, and it felt like this life was okay with that. And they were just like, I'm going to grieve right now. It's okay to grieve. And it was very in touch with its emotions. And that's basically the main idea of that particular session. There's one other part that happened at the very end where her guides gave her, or I can't remember if it was her guides or if it was somebody in the past life, but she got this crystal, this blue crystal, and it felt like there were codes in it. And one of the fun things we did was she was actually able to do light language. And so we did light language back and forth. And it felt like we were transmitting codes to each other. And there was this conversation and this exchange happening. It was really, really cool. All right, we're going to shift into another life. This one was really fun too because it started out underwater. It felt like they were in a past life where we had already gone through the 5D Atlantean portal and we had released the timelines of destruction. And then this one, it was like a shallow, maybe reef. And there was something in this scene that was waiting for her. It felt like a pearl or a crystal or a gem of some kind. And it feels like she was collecting these. She was collecting these just for fun. But what it was doing was it was gridding for the planet. And it felt like these treasures from the ocean were designed to do something for the planet. Then we jumped into another life. Like I said, there was a lot of jumping from life to life. And these are all parallel lives happening in 5D Atlantis. And it felt like she was a feminine being working in a garden. It looked like there were rose bushes. She was wearing a long dress or a robe of some kind, really kind of a lot of priestess energy. And it felt like a temple, or she was like a guardian of the temple. It felt like a very, very sacred and high vibrational place. And as she worked with the different plants around it, it felt like they were raising the vibration. So what she was doing was important. She was very connected to fairy energy. And I brought through some fairy light language to kind of facilitate her connecting more with this. And in that same life, again, it felt like priestess energy connected to the rose, connected to Mary Magdalene and Isis energy. And that's always what I feel like when I connect with that rose template energy. She was very artistic in this life. She was painting and drawing and writing, and she was a lot by herself. There wasn't a lot of interaction with others. I didn't feel other people around her. She was in the zone. She was creating. She was making jewelry, and some of the jewelry had sacred symbols connected with it. She was seeing in some light language. Energy was moving and shifting, and I could see it. I could see that when she sang, energy was forming and moving, and it was intended to help the gridding of the planet. She was also gently tapping on her body during this actual session physically to be able to integrate the 5D energy, and it was very golden coming through, all through her hands and in her heart. It was really, really beautiful. That was the life that we ended with for that particular person. The next life I want to talk about is really cool because this person actually has a background in this life as an architect. And what came through during the session was some really, really intriguing scenes of architecture in 5D Atlantis. What I felt as the scene became clear in my mind was a building or structure of some kind that was so connected to nature, I almost couldn't tell it was there. And I'm sure you've seen in our world today, there are actually buildings and structures that are built and designed to be almost camouflage into nature. But what it felt like was that all of the infrastructure of the 5D Atlantis was so integrated into nature that it was almost seamless. And one of my learnings from this session was the fact that we often feel that man-made things and quote-unquote nature are at odds with each other. But if we truly want to invite the energy of the 5D Atlantis or 5D Gaia in, we have to understand that they can work in harmony. There is a way for that to be done. And we can do that by listening to nature as we create the infrastructure of the city or the village or whatever it is that we're trying to build in order to have communities pop up. Not only are we seeing the possibility of merging our infrastructure with nature, but we are also being encouraged, and even in this session it came through, the idea of merging technology with nature and us releasing any programming that we have, saying that that's not possible, because this is truly how we create the 5D Gaia. This technology is not going to prevent us, it's going to accelerate our ascension. The next one-on-one session I want to talk about was also very fascinating. In a few of these sessions, we were helping people integrate the 5D Atlantis and the 5D lemuria energies into their body, like they had past lives in both. In one, we brought through an elemental type energy. That was one of the scenes. It was like this water elemental. It was swimming and interacting with the different energies in the ocean, like the whales and the dolphins, in the fish. And she came up to a big clamshell. It was like those giant clams that they used to have that I think are extinct now. And this one, she opened it up and there was this pearl. It was an orb of energy that it was a gift for her. And the sea gave her this treasure. It was like a crystal ball, and she could see the energy flowing in, around, and through her. And then that scene ended, and we transitioned into another scene where I felt a golden pyramid priestess energy, an Atlantean priestess energy, very connected to avian energy. So birds, and I saw feathers, like feather headdresses. And it was really cool because normally when I connect with that type of energy, I feel like shamanic or lemurian. But this time it was a little bit more technology in the Golden Temple. They were very connected to Earth. They were connected to birds. They were connected to Gaia. But they were also connected to technology, just like I was saying before. They are not mutually exclusive. And so in the temple, it felt like there was a balancing going on. It felt like there was an interdimensional there who was some kind of an Egyptian goddess. And it felt like, I think it was Ma'et is truly what I felt like it was. And she was balancing, but she was balancing the energy on the planet with technology. And it felt like they were being very careful to make sure that because they were dealing with large quantities of energy during the time of Atlantis, in the 5D Atlantis, they were being more intentional with their use of that energy. They were not creating extreme circumstances and extreme conditions with the energy. For those of you who are a little more familiar with the timeline of destruction, you know that they were concentrating a lot of energy into the middle of the earth, into a big crystal there. And without going into a ton of detail, the crystal shattered and exploded and wreaked havoc on the planet. But again, and this isn't the only life where that came through. They were being very, very conscientious. And I think that's what we were trying to be shown. Our guides are saying, look, there's nothing wrong with technology. Utilize the technology, utilize the crystals, do it with intentionality, and you will not have the destruction at the time of Atlantis. There was also a very large ancient text and a book with symbols in it in this like inner room in this temple, the very center of the temple, There was light language going on. I could feel the vibrations calibrating her. This book reminded me of the Emerald Tablets. At least the energy reminded me of it. And it felt like this Egyptian energy. And she just kind of opened that book and I showed her that scene. And then we gently transitioned out. She finished integrating. And that's kind of the conclusion of that particular session. Another session that I want to drop in and mention was also very, very fascinating. And in this one, we traveled through the Atlantean 5D portal and into a place that I could only define as similar to the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And what my guide said was actually they were trying to imitate this place in Atlantis by creating that garden, because this is a very similar. In this life, her body wasn't very human looking. It had humanoid aspects, but it was like a hybrid. And she was involved in research. And most of her work was with plants, plant medicine, vibrations of the plants. And again, we see the same theme, intertwining technology with nature in a way that was harmonious. I have to quote directly from the transcript of the session in order for you to get the powerful information that came through. I was actually channeling her higher self at this moment in time, and her higher self was bringing through some wisdom about the idea of technology. This is what was said. That advanced technology can be in harmony with nature. Many people on your planet are still living in duality, and they are still seeing separation among things where we see all as one. Technology is nature. Nature is technology. We are technology. Technology is us. It's all a manifestation of Source. It comes from the same place, and Source does not see any difference. And that's where I'm going to go ahead and pause what came through. Now, I'm going to wrap up this little recap of these one-on-one sessions and give you a small glimpse of what happened at our gathering, which you can actually get the playback of, and you can find out how to get that in the link below. But here's the cool thing. Not only can you listen to the replay of our first Atlantean Group Past-Life Regression, you can also still attend a second one that I'm doing. I felt like it was so important that I needed to offer another one. I have limited the amount of people to come. I feel like the number that I have is manageable energetically, and so there is an actual cap to the amount of people that can come. Right now, it's about half full. I'm on the 28th of December here, publishing this. It's about half full, and it's going to happen on the 1st of January. So if you're feeling drawn to participate in that group Past-Life Regression, you can still sign up through the link below. Okay, again, here's my final recap. This is our December 19th Atlantean Group Past-Life Regression. Here are some of the highlights that came through in that one. We started off by gridding and calling in lots of different guides. Some of the main guides I felt coming through were the indigenous grandmothers and grandfathers, as well as several elementals and animal guides. And then once we kind of all got into that state, into our bodies, we'd called all those guides in, I felt like we were traveling through the Atlantean portal, and we were going to do a little opening ceremony there in 5D Atlantis. It felt like a very important place where we went. I couldn't really tell at first, but it just felt like diamond and gold and diamond and gold. And the symbol of this place even looked like a diamond, like two V's connected. This felt like a technology, like a device. Like it was very, very large piece of technology. We were circling around it, and it felt like a power source. It wasn't exactly a crystal, even though there are a lot of crystals in 5D Atlantis. This one felt not so much like a crystal. I don't know if it was like a hybrid with technology, but it felt yellow, kind of a citrine. And I could hear that we were all sort of tapping into a little bit different places. And I could feel like we were all chanting something with our hands held. And then everybody says, "and so it is," and we release our hands. And we were sent to our past lives. And I started describing some of the past lives because when we do a group past life regression, I leave it kind of open-ended, right? For people to feel or sense what they are experiencing. This is obviously a test for your clairs, but there's no better way to do it than in a group, because I feel like when you're in a group setting, it's a lot easier for your clairs to access different visions and different knowledge because they're in the energy of other people who have very heightened clairs. So some of the people were connecting to unicorn beings in Atlantis. Others were elementals. They were not in any human form. Others were interdimensional crystalline light beings. It felt like this big sort of melting pot place where we were. And then again, they went their ways. They went their separate ways. Guess what message I brought through? Again, it had to do with the fact that in 5D Atlantis, nature and technology lived harmoniously. So I mentioned to everybody that was there, I said, if you're not seeing anything at all, you're going to see hybrid technology and plants and trees all woven together. Now, here's some of the different scenes. Again, I was literally trying to tune in to all the participants. Some people were in libraries in Atlantis, keeping records, storing records, doing research. Other people were in laboratories. Other people were teaching children or teaching meditation, like in a monastery. That actually came up in a one-on-one session too. I felt like one of the one-on-one sessions was like a Yoda being that was teaching people how to meditate. Some of the people were visiting lives in 5D Atlantis where they were communicating with interdimensionals, almost like air traffic control for the ships, because there's a lot of exchange between benevolent interdimensionals and the 5D Atlanteans. They are very integrated in there. Some of the lives were in the inner earth, working with the crystals, mining. Other people were working with the mycelium kingdom, with the mushrooms. All of these different lives were coming through. It was so, so incredible for me to witness in this large group of people. And the scenes were just flashing, flashing, flashing. Again, one of the energies that came through most strongly was the fact that the ascended Atlantis was very balanced in tech, and it was in heart-centered and head-centered co-creation. I felt like there was just complementary energy. And also, this is something fascinating. This came through in sessions. I don't know how many of you listening are connected to Sirian energy. There was a lot of whale, dolphin, Sirian energy. Like there was this really cool portal from Sirius to Atlantis that was very open, and there was a lot of exchange between the two places, okay? After we did that, I ended up having everybody begin to integrate that past life that they had connected with, integrate that into their being. And I think if I remember right, most people were doing it through their solar plexus. I was having them expand their solar plexus and their heart too, and integrate through breath work this 5D Atlantean soul aspect. And then after that, the guides had me take and have them play with 5D Atlantean elementals. There were rainbows and butterflies and fairies and all kinds of crazy looking creatures all over the place. And their guides said, let them play in this beautiful realm of the 5D Atlantis. Some of the creatures were robotic. They were like little nanobots, but they were sentient. They were very high vibrational. And it was so fascinating because so many people, I felt like their little inner child wanted to stay there. We eventually had to finish up. So we fully integrated. We expressed gratitude to all of the guides and all of the beings that came in. And that's how we wrapped up that particular gathering. Again, I want to remind you that you can purchase the playback to that through the link below if you're wanting to get all the details. I just barely covered very much of it, but that was sort of the highlight moments. Thank you so much, my friends, for jumping on this podcast episode to co-create with me and hear a little bit about my experiences connecting with 5D Atlantis. Again, for those of you who feel drawn, I have opened up another 5D Atlantean Group Past-Life Regression and soul integration. We do all of that in this 1 hour, and you can click on the link below to sign up for that. Thank you so much to those of you who allowed me to share your stories. If I had a one-on-one with you but wasn't able to share a story with you, thank you again, though, for coming and co-creating with me so that I could learn more about 5D Atlantis. I feel like this is knowledge that we are going to transmit, even if it's just subconsciously, to the rest of the collective as we remove the veil about our experiences in 5D Atlantis and begin to merge that timeline with this timeline. Finally, as we near the end of 2022, I'm really getting excited to share with you my January energy update, which is literally going to be the 2023 energy update, not just for the month of January, but for the whole year. A lot of things have been dropping in, and I will be publishing that episode on the 1st of January. As always, I am sending you so much love and reminding you that I am you, and you are me, and we are we. Until next time.